that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues of the many fields of knowledge, all are steps on the path of omniscience. May these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. Om Manjushri, please accomplish this. Good evening. Welcome. Welcome back to this. So tonight we continue with generating confidence, Ziji, in Tibetan, Trungpa Rinpoche's specialty. How do we generate confidence in Mahamudra? Well, maybe we'll talk at the end of the chapter when we're finished going through it. Then we'll know fully and completely. So we're on page 129, starting with the ancillary topic. It's always good to go through the ancillary topics, dispelling the wrong views of others. So we have more of this, which probably doesn't make much sense to many of us. But this was a big issue for the Kagyupas back in the day, and to some extent to this day. These little things that go on between different sects, and Sakya Pandita was one of the greatest scholars and masters of Buddhism in Tibet, and certainly of the Sakya school, one of the five great masters, and it's very famous for having written three very important texts. One is a path text distinguishing, the sage's intent or something, revealing the sage's intent, where he goes through the stages of the path. It's a Lamrim text. And the second one is the Treasury of Reasoning, which is like the Bible for logic in most Tibetan traditions, or at least a reference point. And the third one is a text called the Three Vows. And the three vows are to the three jewels: refuge, bodhisattva vow, and the samaya vow of the Vajrayana. And in that text, he makes some comments about the Kagyupa's way of practicing Mahamudra, and he compares them. He sort of has these comments are pejorative. They're sort of snide little comments comparing the Kagyupas to an early individual on the scene of Buddhism in Tibet, when Buddhism first arrives in Tibet. The predominant strain of Buddhism that came into Tibet was Indian Buddhism, brought initially by the great bodhisattva and scholar Shantarakshita in the late 700s, and as his attempt to overpower the lords or the chieftains or whatever of the various aspects of the Tibetan cultural elite and powerful nobles in the Tibetan world who wur Bunpos. They were disrupting the building of the first monastery, Samye Monastery. Shantarakshita succeeded in ordaining 7 Tibetan young boys to see, as an experiment, to see if Tibetans could successfully become monks. And that was considered doubtful because Tibetans were famous for being incredibly unruly and barbaric. And then he appointed 7 young Tibetans to train to become translators. And there was a significant overlap. 3 or 4 of them were in both little groups. obviously they both succeeded, both groups succeeded, which is why we are where we are today. But he had trouble building the monastery for them, and so he told the king, bring the great sorcerer, which is an English word, obviously. I wonder what word they used in Sanskrit or Tibetan. Bring the great Pandita Padmasambhava to overpower the evil forces. And he came, and on his way there, he did retreats in many places in Nepal and Bhutan. And once in Tibet, he went to 13 tiger nest caves called Taktsang. There were 13 Taksangs. We only hear about the one, like, most famous tiger's nest cave that hangs precipitously on this sheer, like, 2,000-foot cliff or whatever. But he did visit 12 others and did various practices in them to overcome evil forces, and then came into Tibet proper. And Paro, which is where Toksong in Bhutan is, was at that time part of Tibet. And then he came into Lhasa, the capital of Tibet, and met with the king. And the rest, as they say, is history. But also at that time, we find out. So let's see. So a few years into that project, Shantarakshita is getting old, and he brings his nephew, he brings his main disciple, Kamalashila, to come and sort of take over teaching for him. And Kamalashila famously writes a 3-volume book on meditation, the stages of meditation. And he encounters some Chinese Buddhists, presumably of like the Chan flavor, Chan being the original version of Buddhism that we now know as Zen, primarily. Zen is a Japanese word, and Chan is the Chinese word, and it's the translation. Both of them are the translation for dhyana, which is meditation in Sanskrit. And so they were also in the capital of Lhasa, and so the king heard that they were there and teaching and gathering students, and he was concerned because he checked into what their teachings were, and they were sort of like of the flavor that we might think of as Zen these days, like very abrupt, no concept, no complexity, don't do any of this stuff, just like experience enlightenment on the spot, just be there, be enlightened. And so there was no path, no sense of path, and no sense of attention to conduct and the karmic ramifications of conduct. And so he got a very bad rap, and his name was Hua Shan. And so the king said, these are very different strains of Buddhism. I'm confused. I just want things to be simple. I want one flavor that I'm going to get behind and promote, and that's going to bring everybody together. And hey, we got the Bunpos over there. That's enough, like, difficulty. We don't need difficulties within the Buddhists. So he said, let's have a debate, which apparently was one of the major pastimes in life back then, since they didn't have Sunday football games. And so everybody came, and according to the later history of Tibetans, Kamalashila wins the debate. And because they didn't trust their translators, they debated without words. They debated in sign language, little like dharmic symbols. And there's a wonderful telling of this in the end of The Profound Treasury of the Ocean of Dharma by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche in Volume 2. In the appendix, he goes through and recounts their little theatrics, so to speak. And on the other hand, the Chinese histories say that Hua Shan was the victor. So, who knows? Who are you going to believe? Chinese history also says that China is part of Tibet. Sorry, Tibet is part of China. And we know how reliable that or not that is. And in fact, there was this period of time, King Trisong Detsen, the king at the time, was a very successful and powerful army conqueror, and he actually conquered most of China. And so was known as like the major power in the area, which is why he had kings come from, princes, daughters of the emperor come from China and Nepal to be his among his wives. So, um, we see a lot of so one of the worst insults you can throw at a Tibetan Buddhist is to compare them to Huashan, compare their teachings to Huashan. That's like if you were to compare somebody to Donald Trump, maybe today. Maybe not that bad. Sorry, Sue.
Okay, so when was the debate? What was the year around?
It was probably the early 800s,
800s.
like 814 or something like that. I'm not quite sure. And so we see that going on here with Sakya Pandita um, in a little bit of rivalry with other schools, is casting aspersion on the Kagyu version of Mahamudra, saying it's similar to Huashan. And so Tashi Namgyal goes to great pains to dispel that, as do many other authors since then refer to this in this remark by Sakya Pandita's rather famous remark. So a certain person, Sakya Pandita, says, actually there is no difference between the present day Mahamudra and the Dzogchen of the Huashan. So the later, by his time, they had compared Huashan to Dzogchen. And so, it's like, um, we all are like, why is Dzogchen a bad thing to begin with? And so he's like chopping on two different traditions at the same time. He's cutting down, he's making snide remarks at the Kagyus and the Nyingmas at the same time. It's not very, like, befitting of such a accomplished practitioner, but I guess he had his reasons. And so Dzogchen, you you may have noticed, I don't know, those of you who studied Dzogchen, it probably doesn't come through in most books these days that don't go into such things, but most Dzogchen texts have a considerable portion of the text devoted to the authenticity of the Dzogchen scriptures, the Tantras, which was in dispute for most of Tibetan history. And so, like, Dudjom Rinpoche, in his famous History of the Nyingma tradition, has a huge section on has like a couple of different sections on defending the Nyingma lineage. And so Dzogchen was viewed as not completely believably traceable to Indian roots. If you weren't able to show Indian roots, you were not invited to sit at the table, so to speak. So anyway, there's no difference between these Mahamudra people and the Dzogchen of the Chinese tradition, i.e. of Huashan, except for changing terms, descending from above and climbing from below to instantaneous and gradualist. That statement reflects nothing more than his desire to say something critical. Dzogchen is called Ati Yoga and is regarded as the culmination of secret mantra, whereas the meditation of Heishang is asserted to be part of drawn from 80 sutras. Not quite sure why that is such a heinous crime either, but apparently that's some collection of the Chinese Buddhist teachings of that time. Therefore, not only are there many differences in their meditation systems, the source of their teachings are different. There's no one who explains the Dzogchen of the Chinese tradition as authentic. So he's dissing the Chinese as well. And you find later on, like recently, there have been a number of scholarly presentation showing that like there was a lot of influence between the early Chinese Chan and the Dzogchen teachers, actually, believe it or not. Sri Sima, one of the main masters in the Dzogchen early lineage of the seven main leaders of that lineage, spent was like sort of Chinese or from Western China and spent a lot of time in China. So to say that Dzogchen is the meditation of Heishang is to reduce the Dharma to non-Dharma. It also shows a complete lack of understanding that the meaning of Mahamudra lies in the thought expressed in the Doha trilogy. It's an interesting list of texts here. Like, what are his main sources? The Eightfold Treasury of Shorter Dohas, the Seven City Texts, the Essence Cycle, the Sixfold Essence Cycle, the Dharma Cycle on Amanasikara, which means non-attentiveness, which is sort of this anomalous title that Maitripa comes up with for his presentation of Mahamudra. Another similar text, and it's all about non-conceptuality, appreciating, acknowledging that a non-conceptual mind is not only um, part of the meditative experience, but actually the ultimate state of mind is non-conceptual, non-mentation. So there is wakefulness without mentation, was his point. Interestingly, though, these texts are all now becoming translated in English. It's like for years, these would just be like lists and books that you would read and like, wow, what are these texts? And recently, there's now 3 versions of these, which Elizabeth Callahan, the translator of this, has translated a huge collection that Jamgon Kongshul and Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo and Chokling Rinpoche, Choksher Lingpa put together, sort of starting the remade tradition. They put together the main teachings of all of the practice traditions of Tibet, and those are being published now, funded by Tsadra, in these big, huge tomes. And she's put out the first volume on Marpa Kagyu, which has many of these. And then Karl Brunholzl, my other guru, is putting out a collection called the Indian Mahamudra Texts of the Seventh Karmapa in 6 enormous volumes, as is his style. And there's another book coming out translating just the 7 city texts, which should be cool. Anyway, likewise, Sakya Pandita's account that begins the appearance of this Dharma tradition is not trustworthy because it contains many inventions that are not in keeping with respected sources of the account. They're talking about the account of the debate, such as that given by Kamala Shila's students at the beginning of the text stages of meditation. So there's many different versions of that debate. Let's see, Sakya Pandita continues, relying only on the text of the Chinese scholar scriptural tradition. Some secretly changed the name of his system to Mahamudra. That is really low. The present day Mahamudra is, for the most part, a Chinese Dharma tradition. Ouch. Ouch, that really hurts. I can see why they're upset. That is just his conjecture and actually complete fiction. There are absolutely no sources or references for saying that present day Mahamudra is based on the text of the Chinese scholar, and that the name of his teachings was later changed to Mahamudra. The name Mahamudra was already well known in the Tantras and their commentaries and to all Panditas and Siddhas. Which reminds me, I forgot to mention that in that list of texts that was given earlier, there are tantras attributed to the Buddha in his form as Vajradhara. By concealing his own faults of not comprehending most of the Tantra texts that teach that subject, Sakya Pandita makes the mistake of deciding that the Dharma is non-Dharma. To make such accusations while being uncertain is not the conduct of those with sound modes of discourse. Again, someone casts aspersions. Heishang of China did not advocate the observance of causes and their results in the context of conduct. This was his main flaw, like in the context of the view Okay, in the ultimate level of the truth, cause and result does not operate. There are no causes and no results. But in the relative, which is where the conduct, when we talk about the three higher trainings of conduct, meditation, and wisdom, conduct occurs in the realm of the relative and is essential to pay exceedingly fine attention to karmic cause and result. In the context of the view and meditation, citing drawn from 80 sutras, he taught not engaging mentally in any concepts, so just disengaging, right, from concepts. Sounds very Zen. Good or bad. In the context of the result, he did not accept that Buddhahood is anything other than the realization of mind. That sounds very familiar. Therefore, present-day Mahamudra meditators seem to belong to his tradition. So this is another quote, I think, from Sakya Pandita. Subsequent conceited scholars have not used their intelligence to examine such statements and instead just repeat that explanation despite its being unfounded. They just spout nonsense with their highly exaggerated accusations while not having understood the vital points of their opponent's philosophical tenet system, view, and meditation. The final stages of meditation by Kamalashila sets out Heishang's positions and refutes them. Some think that sentient beings experience results, including higher realms and circle in samsara, due to the power of virtuous and non-virtuous actions, which are created by mental concepts. Thus, those who think nothing and do nothing are fully liberated from samsara. So he's presenting like a version, or their version of the view of Heishang. Therefore, we should not think anything and should not engage in virtuous conduct, such as generosity. The practice of generosity and so forth is only taught from the perspective of foolish people. Those who think and speak in that way have rejected the entire Mahayana. Since the Mahayana is the root of all yanas, to reject it is to reject all yanas. Thus to say, do not think anything, causes the rejection of the prajna, whose nature is the discernment of what is true. Since discernment of what is true is the root of true wisdom, to reject that discernment is to reject transcendent prajna by cutting its root. To say, do not practice generosity and so forth, is to utterly renounce methods such as generosity and implying the rest of the paramitas. While it is the case that discerning prajna is abandoned in the context of view of meditation, and that virtues such as generosity are downplayed in that same context, it is one's own misunderstanding to say that Heishang does not advocate the observance of causes and their results. At the start of its presentation of Heishang's assertions, the stages of meditation, gives his statement regarding virtuous and unvirtuous actions and their results. If Heishang adhered to drawn from 80 sutras, he understood causes and results. Furthermore, the detailed account of the debate between him and Kamalashila that Sakya Pandita gives in his treatise is completely unreliable, since it contains many instances of disjointed statements, exaggerated accusations, internal contradictions, and corruptions of Kamalashila's refutations. Sort of like a standard politician just making stuff up, right? Interesting. Therefore, to say that meditation on the abiding state Mahamudra is similar to that Heishang system is simply an exaggerated conjecture, but I will not go into a refutation of that right now, out of fear of becoming too wordy. It's very scary, isn't it? However, to put to rest wrong notions, I will present some of the ways that Mahamudra differs from the Heishang system in the context of conduct. Heishang asserts that the actions of amassing merit and purifying negative deeds are taught for the foolish because they do not understand suchness. And in fact, he downplays amassing merit and purifying negative actions. Here in our Mahamudra system, it is said emptiness arises in causes and their results. Once we realize emptiness, it is necessary to be very assiduous about the interdependent connections between causes and their results. Similarly, our Mahamudra system contains very subtle distinctions, such as whether one taste manifests as the interdependence of the many or not, whether there is proficiency with the conventional or not, and whether there is an understanding of how to plant the seeds of the Rupakayas or not. So one taste is a term that can either refer to a stage on the Mahamudra path, one of the four yogas, this one taste being the third of those, or it can be a general approach to the Tantra, to Vajrayana, of one taste. And in this context, I think it has that latter meaning. So, in the context of meditation, Heishang asserts not thinking about anything and not engaging mentally. Here, in the beginning, when developing stillness, we need to cultivate mindfulness that is not distracted from its object and the vivid alertness that recognizes dullness and agitation, those two essential factors of shamatha, mindfulness and alertness. Trenpa and Sheshan in Tibetan, or Smriti and Samprajanya in Sanskrit. Heishang advocates only remaining suspended in non-conceptuality and not considering whether there are faults or virtues. Here, that is called stagnant non-conceptuality. It's considered a flaw. And we'll see later in the text, he goes through a whole list of different flaws that one may experience. And we already saw some of that in the shamatha section. Heishang does not engage in any examination or analysis during meditation. Here, discerning prajna must examine and analyze the object of the meditation as appropriate. Heishang rests in a state in which the mind is unengaged, one that is karmically unspecified or neutral, free from mindfulness and awareness. Here we must not be distracted for even a moment from mindfulness and awareness of the specific object of meditation. Heishang considers not thinking about anything to be sufficient. Here such things are strains and deviations, and their flaws must be cleared up. Sort of puts an interesting background context to this whole issue of the way Trungpa Rinpoche presented Vipassana as panoramic awareness without any analysis or investigation versus the remainder of the Indo-Tibetan Mahayana tradition. In the context of the view, Heishang does not advocate prajna that arises from reflection or from meditation. Here we must use those two types of prajna to discover and realize the view of the abiding state. Heishang lacks the view for realizing suchness. Here, once we have cut through a root or basis of percepts and perceivers, we must sustain the view in which we are aware of the abiding state of those. And the translator inserts percepts and perceivers. In the context of the result, Heishang asserts that liberation is attained only by habituating ourselves to the continuity of simply not thinking about anything. Here it is explained that having realized suchness and having habituated ourselves to that, by not wandering from it, we must purify all of even the most subtle of dualistic appearances, which is a reference to the way that the two obscurations are overcome on the path. The final stage is overcoming the very subtle remainders of the knowledge obscuration that are referred to as subtle dualistic appearances. For all those reasons, it is unseemly for someone to make statements out of jealousy that are misinterpretations and denials of the true nature, because they cause those who trust him to create the karma for abandoning the Dharma. Sakya Pandita makes this statement about his own system. Our Mahamudra is the wisdom arisen from Abhishek and is the self-arisen wisdom manifesting from the samadhis of the two processes. What are the two processes? Creation and completion. If we examine that assertion, we can say that there is no doubt that the realization of the four mudras in general and the uncommon abiding state Mahamudra in particular can arise on the basis of cultivating the samadhis of the two processes. Nevertheless, it is highly illogical to assert that Mahamudra is the experience in which emptiness seals the bliss, that is, the satisfying sensation accompanying the physical and mental released bliss occurring during the third Abhisheka. And this is a very polite reference to sexual union. Such assertions are refuted by many, such as Indrabhuti. Evil persons say the bliss arising from the two organs is suchness. The supreme victors did not teach that such bliss is great bliss. What arises through interdependence cannot be the recognition of suchness, because that is a bliss not inherently present on all occasions. It's a bliss that's dependent upon that situation. And in the first stanza, there's different grades of bliss. There's 4 stages of bliss. And that from union is a lower level of bliss, not great bliss. The third stanza is the wisdom of the Sugatas knows its own nature. It is said to be great bliss, since it is the foremost of all types of bliss. Great bliss is not impermanent. Great bliss is always permanent. Wow, what an outrageous thing to say, something's permanent. Sakya Pandita's assertion is also illogical because it contradicts the Kala Chakra teaching. So interesting, referring to the Kala Chakra, the highest Tantra of the new Tantra schools of Sakya, Geluk, and Kagyu, teaching that Mahamudra is unchanging bliss, and because that Mahamudra, he asserts, is the sensation of released bliss, which is changeable. It is even more illogical to assert that that released bliss is sealed with analytical emptiness, because the emptiness that is the result of analyzing the skandhas is said to be a nihilistic emptiness, as explained in the following citations. So this is a subtle reference to the way that the different traditions pursue the realization of emptiness. And the Kagyu tradition is famous for emphasizing the unity of emptiness and luminosity, which they call emptiness, that is the supreme of all aspects. And then sometimes refers to the emptiness presented or described in the Sakya and Geluk tradition as being a nihilistic emptiness that results in negating everything. Kala Chakra Tantra says emptiness that is the result of analyzing the skandhas has no essence, like a banana tree. So if emptiness is just the result of negating the skandhas, then it's not true emptiness. Emptiness endowed with the most sublime of manifestations is not like that. It's neat to see that phrase, emptiness endowed with, however you translate it, I said the most supreme of all qualities is often how it's translated here, with the most sublime of manifestations. To see that comes from the Kala Chakra, that's really neat. The achievement of unchanging wisdom, which is a section of the Stainless Light's commentary. So the Stainless Light, Vimala Prabha, is the main commentary on the Kala Chakra Tantra. Famously explains the whole thing, and so all translations basically present both Kala Chakra and their commentary. On the wisdom chapter of the Kala Chakra Tantra says, keep far away from a nihilistic, I should say, I think you guys say nihilistic emptiness. the emptiness that is the result of analyzing phenomena which are of the nature of an aggregation of tiny particles. You're obsessed with these tiny particles. What is it with the tiny particles? Furthermore, in Sakya Pandita's system, it is very logical that the illustrative wisdom. So this term, illustrative wisdom, is a technical term that is the counterpoint to the actual wisdom. There's it's often translated as example wisdom and the actual wisdom. The example wisdom is the way that we first experience the reality, ultimate reality, the true nature, the indivisibility of emptiness and luminosity. We, it's the wisdom that is developed by the path, and gradually, as we perfect that experience and realization of the true nature of reality, we encounter the ultimate wisdom, the primordial wisdom. I can't remember the term they use for that. It's the example and the actual wisdom, something like that. And that's complete enlightenment, where we discover the example wisdom or illustrative wisdom dissolves into the primordial wisdom that was always there. Whereas the illustrative wisdom is what we develop along the path, so it has a sense of being contrived and created. Robert.
So the illustrative is more conceptual.
It's hard to say that it's more conceptual, because in order to experience it, it's a non-conceptual experience.
So
But it's
maybe there's some conceptual chatter around it.
I don't know that anybody would acknowledge that it's conceptual. It's it's not as definitive or ultimate or complete as the
So
other.
something's still missing.
Something is still missing.
Or there's something that still needs to be let go of.
Okay. It's one way of
Is
putting it, yeah.
is that related to the use of the word mere? Like,
No, that's
okay,
that's a whole
different. Okay.
different context, yeah. It's sometimes it's related to these terms. You'll see the child and mother clear light, when the child and the mother meet. So during the path of Tantra, we develop the child clear light, the experience of clear light, the indivisibility of emptiness and luminosity throughout the practice of Vajrayana. And that gradually unites with the mother. The child dissolves into the mother wisdom, clear light. So let's see, where were we? It is illogical that the illustrative wisdom of the third Abhisheka, which is the one that they're arguing about, which is all about sexual union, that's either actual or visualized. There's those two types. The illustrative wisdom of the third Abhishek is pointed out to be released bliss, which is changeable, and that the actual wisdom of the fourth Abhishek is pointed out to be a nihilistic emptiness, which is given the name freedom from elaborations, because that means he, Sakyapandita, accepts the positions of the opponents, refuted by both the Kalachakra Tantra and the text City of Wisdom. It also means that although the illustrative and actual wisdoms must necessarily, so here we have the other, actual wisdoms must necessarily be causes and results that are of similar types and connected, they are pointed out as two things that are unconnected and of dissimilar types. It also means that, that's a tongue twister for you, huh? The logical entailment, so the result or the conclusion of this, of the position Sakya Pandita takes in the text clarifying the sage's intent, the Lamrim text, that Mahamudra must arise from Abhisheka is unreasonable because it requires him to explain how ground Mahamudra, the primordial abiding state of all phenomena, arises from the bestowal of an Abhisheka. How can that possibly be? It has to be primordially pre-existing. If he does not accept ground Mahamudra in that way, then he must say that there is no path Mahamudra and no result in Mahamudra, since the result becomes manifest through the process of habituating oneself during the path to what is present as the ground. His position that Mahamudra must arise from Abhishek is also unreasonable because it necessitates the karma of abandoning the Dharma found in many texts, such as the previously mentioned Mahamudra text by Saraha Senior and Junior, which is really interesting reference indicating that Tashi Namgyal, believes that there were two people with the name Saraha. And when they say senior and junior, they don't mean like in the West where we have, Tom Johnson Sr. and Tom Johnson Jr., father and son. They mean like there was a Saraha at one point, and then like 100 years or 200 years later, there was another version of Saraha, which helps explain like how Saraha could have taught Nagarjuna, since Nagarjuna lived like 600, 700 years before Saraha's texts or activity occurred. The king that he wrote his dohas to. Anyway, let's see. Tilopa, Naropa, Maitrapa, and others, and many related texts, such as the seven city texts, and finally is unreasonable because it would mean that the Mahasiddhas who composed those texts must be refuted for their wrong views. He soundly refuted Sakya Pandita in this way, which has all this oddness of their little argument, but in the process of which it reveals some interesting aspects and nuances that are not minor nuances of the way that Mahamudra needs to be understood correctly by going through all these different points: the conduct, the meditation, the study, the path, and so forth, and then Tantra. But remember this last one, because we'll come back to it. His position that Mahamudra must arise from Abhisheka is also unreasonable. So how Mahamudra is the profound point of all sutras and tantras. So in order to generate confidence, first we present what Mahamudra is, which he did in the first part of this chapter, and then you refute mistaken views about it, and then you further proclaim the correct view of Mahamudra by showing how it's presented in all of the scriptures of one's tradition. So this is two parts precisely identifying the essence of this path, which we'll start with. It is explained in the Doha collections and some of the symbolic transmission of Mahamudra's cycle that this path system is, within the two categories of sutra and mantra, the secret mantrayana. Within that, it is the third of its divisions into a path of blessings, a path of reviving, and a path of direct cognition. It is taught that it requires the ripening abhishekas, extensive or abbreviated. It's also said that since the preceding yanas are like steps on the path, they should not be ignored and should be cultivated as suitable. So I don't know about you guys, I'm a little confused about this Abhisheka being required or not, because he just said that it was unreasonable to require Abhisheka, and here it says that it requires the ripening Abhisheka. And there's different types of Abhishekas, right? There's ripening and maturing Abhishekas are the two main types of Abhishekas, and the maturing Abhishekas are much more extensive, and so you could say, well, okay, it's just the ripening. Within the secret conduct, because that's relevant to like how can those of us who have not received Abhisheka pursue Mahamudra practice. So we'll see how that plays out in the next couple of pages. Within the secret conduct collection, which is a collection of tantras or something. This Mahamudra path system is said to be the latter of the three classifications of 1, the philosophical paramita yana, 2, the secret mantra Vajrayana, and 3, the yana of the unsurpassed essence, which are designated from the perspective of those to be trained being of lesser, intermediate, or supreme intelligence. So this Mahamudra is said to be the yana of the unsurpassed essence. And so here we are introduced to this notion that very clearly it was hinted at earlier and talked about in the introduction, that Mahamudra is presented as a path that's separate from Vajrayana, from Tantra, and as superior to Tantra. This Mahamudra path is explained in 4 ways. It is not directly concordant with the preceding 2 yanas. It does not contradict them. It has some concordant aspects, and it is superior. Nevertheless, some abhishekas and blessings, elaborate or concise, are required, and deity meditation is taught according to the circumstances, in which case this Mahamudra path must be considered to be a division of secret Mantrayana. That's pretty conclusive. Looking at the text of the great Brahmansara, we see that he speaks of a path of the essence as a short path in his Doha for the Queen, which is from his Doha trilogy. He states, on this path, the essence of the unsurpassed Mahayana results are integrated into the path. Results are present primordially. So this is a way of explaining the famous description of Tantra as being taking the path, the result as the path. It also proclaims devoid of mandalas and burnt offerings, without mantras, mudras, or consecrations. So without all this ritual stuff, i.e. without Tantra, it can't be produced through Tantras or Shastras. This Vajra wisdom is lovely in its natural state. The Doha for the people. So he has a Doha for the king, the queen, one for each of them, and then everybody else. No Tantra, no mantra, no object of contemplation or contemplation itself. Those just create confusion in our mind. Oh, does that sound like Heishang? It also observes, why do we need candles? Why offering cakes? Why burn incense? I added that, sorry. What will such things do? What's the use of teaching secret mantra? Through those statements and others, Sarha teaches that the essence of this path does not rely on secret mantra. He asserts it to be without the 3 conditions. And the 3 conditions are bliss, clarity, and non-thought. Beyond the 4 joys, joy, great joy, unsurpassable joy, and joy beyond joy, and superior to luminosity itself. However, which is really interesting, similar to luminosity. What does that mean? I guess that's the essence. Luminosity is considered the essence of tantric Vajrayana view and practice and result. However, since the Doha for the Queen describes how to rely upon karma mudras, mature them through abhishekas, and engage in the conduct of discipline, if Mahamudra practice is combined with secret mantra, that is fine. That's okay. The teachings of, so, he quotes one source as saying you need abhishekas, and then Sarha's like, give up all that stuff. You don't need any of that stuff. And so he sort of says, it's fine either way. It seems maybe. The teachings of the incomparable Tokpo, i.e. Gampopa, say, generally speaking, there are 3 types of paths. The path that utilizes inferential cognition. Inferential cognition uses logical statements, either expressly constructed with a very formal methodology, or just informally using deductive or inductive logic that we all do sort of instinctively all the time, all day long. The path that utilizes inferential cognition involves analyzing phenomena in terms of being a single unit or a plurality, thereby, I added, thereby determining that they lack any nature, and recognizing that there is no other destination or conclusion, which I think is a reference to. So the first one is there's two main Madhyamaka reasonings, which we looked at some time ago. There's the nature, looking at the nature of phenomena and realizing that they're neither single or plural, and then looking at how they come about and realizing that cause and result doesn't make sense in the realm of entities. So I think that's what this other destination is referring to, and then meditating upon the illogicalness of there being a thing, anything that is a thing, i.e. realizing emptiness. The path that utilizes blessings purifies the channels, winds, and so forth. So blessings is the Vajrayana Tantric path of empowerments that relies or that uses the skillful means of purifying the inner subtle body, thereby creating as a support for the process of generating oneself in the form of a deity. And thirdly, the path that utilizes direct cognition is that of intrinsic Mahamudra. So non-conceptual direct cognition is the specialty of essence Mahamudra, i.e. conveyed or brought about through complex skillful means such as the slapping with a flip-flop, the famous encounter between Tilopa and Naropa, or rather Naropa and Tilopa's flip-flop. Alternatively, the three paths are the following. The path that abandons the bases is that of the Parmityana. Its relinquishment is one where what is relinquished and the remedies are taken to be separate. The path that, path and result, relinquishment and remedies. The path that transforms the bases is that of secret mantra, so transformation. So first is relinquishment or renunciation, is Hinayana Mahayana, and then Vajrayana is transformation.
What does bases mean?
Yeah, I think this refers to the bases of experience are objects, subjects. The five categories of objects are referred to as the bases. Those are the skandhas. It's a sort of Abhidharma way of referring to the skandhas and the ayatanas and the dhatus. I believe that's what is being talked about. Abandoning the bases as being discrete, actual realities, dharmas as being real. The path that transforms the bases, so it transforms the skandhas and ayatanas into deities. The skandhas are, I think, female, and the elements, the ayatanas, are male, something like that. The transformation of the support is to generate the body of the deity. The transformation of the supported is to regard the faculties as a vajra and lotus, so to transform all our faculties into the indivisibility of wisdom and compassion, as embodied by the vajra and the lotus, I guess. The transformation of phenomena is to take mental afflictions as the path, taking the mind as the path. This is the main strategy of Vajrayana. Thoughts are regarded as wisdom. Stains cleanse stains, and thoughts sever thoughts. The path that recognizes the bases is that of Mahamudra. So the path that just recognizes the bases doesn't do anything to them, just recognizes them. And let's see. It has nothing to abandon, no remedy, nothing to transform, and no transformer. All is the magical display of mind. Awakening occurs by recognizing that the primordially unborn nature of the Dharmakaya is present innately within mind itself and becoming familiar with seeing that. very helpful descriptions of these different ways of pursuing the path in Buddhism. Or the three paths are as follows. The paramita path is for those of lesser abilities who have faith and engage the path of accumulation. The translator inserted who have faith. She must have done that based upon some variant of the text, I imagine. Secret mantra is for those of intermediate abilities who have concepts and mental afflictions, most of us, and who engage the path of method. Mahamudra is for those of sharpest abilities who have prajna and engage suchness. Now that sounds like it's very few people are like that. I would not fit in that category. So, but don't let that be off-putting. The idea is that we get there. Lori.
Yeah, so these descriptions of the three paths, three different ways, we've come across this before in this book. You know, it
We did.
keeps coming up. And they keep kind of describing them as three options. But it seems like today the teachers coming from Tibet are pretty much saying do all three. That it's don't pick one, or it, right? Isn't that kind of the conclusion it
That
seems
is
that?
totally, that's a great point. Thank you. That when you said today the teachers coming from Tibet, basically all the traditions that exist today, all of them have one do all three of these, or promote all, or at least the first two. Some traditions don't
Right.
promote the Mahamudra, the third phase, but those that do promote Mahamudra do promote the other two paths as well
Mhm.
as accompanying skillful means, and are quite forceful about saying you really need to cultivate those other two paths in order to get anywhere close to Mahamudra. They don't say anywhere close, but that's my gloss based on the way it's described as for those without concepts, you know. So yes, I think that's actually the way of making it okay to present Mahamudra to people who are not of the highest intelligence as defined here as being
Yeah.
without concept. You know, the the bulk of us, the rest of us, or all of us.
Right. So we can all take part. Yeah.
And the way to make that okay is to practice it in accompanied by these other two paths. Yeah, thank you very much for that. That's a great point. Those demonstrate that Gampopa considers Mahamudra to be a short path separate from both sutra and mantra. On some occasions, he uses the term path of blessings to refer to when realized gurus guide worthy students who have forsaken the activities of this life and they're liberated to the single stride path of Mahamudra. What an interesting phrase, a single stride as opposed to the graduated stepwise path of the Lamrim tradition, which does not rely upon the main paths of sutra or mantra. Later on, those of the practice lineage incorporated many practices of sutra and mantra, the requisite maturing abhishekas, sets of preliminaries and enhancement techniques related to specific circumstances into the Mahamudra path to conform with sutra and mantra. So this was happening back in Tashi Namgyal's time as well. So it's been going on for a long time, the integration of all three. That being so, to consider Mahamudra a profound path that is shared with sutra and mantra is useful for many levels of intellect and does not involve contradictions. Thus the synthesis. We see this happen over and over again in the development of Buddhism, where we see the establishment of different paths, different ways of understanding the Buddha's teachings and implementing them as practice and path, and then gradually them being synthesized over and over, divergence and synthesis. The main one being like Hinayana and Mahayana initially were like separate, and then they were brought together in a continuum. The way this path includes the profound points of the sutras and tantras, all the Victor's teachings. So just on that, like you may have heard of this sutra, the Lotus Sutra, or the Sutra of the White Lotus of the Dharma, or whatever it's called, the white Dharma of the lotus, something like that. This famous Buddhist sutra where the Buddha says all beings are going to achieve enlightenment. Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and there's no, he says there's no dubious family and there's no cut-off family. So he refers to, there's this scheme in early Mahayana of there being 5 gotras, Sanskrit term, that's like lineages or heritage, or as Trungpa Rinpoche translates, genes. And they're said to be like discrete paths, like that are exclusive in terms of their ends, and that some people are actually were considered not able to tread the path. And so then this Lotus Sutra comes along, the Buddha says they're all going to become Buddhas, and he starts predicting the Buddhahood of all these arhats that, you know, in the early tradition are like, they're done, they're not coming back, they can't be Buddhas, they're done and over, they're going to nirvana, the cessation of nirvana. So that was a major synthesis that happened right there. All the victor's teachings, be they sutra or tantras, teach the methods for realizing suchness, the abiding state of phenomena. The intention of his teachings is to lead us to suchness. The culmination of practice ends up being suchness. All his instructions, no matter what mode they are, profound or vast, are directed towards suchness. It is said in the sutras, all the teachings of the Tathagata lead to suchness, end up at suchness, and are directed towards suchness. Kamalashila says the words of the Buddha Bhagavan are excellently presented, either directly or indirectly. They elucidate suchness and lead us to suchness. Batisha says all the teachings within the 84,000 collections of Dharma lead to and end up at this Dharma Ta, which is Sanskrit for suchness. No sutra or tantra. Actually, it's not Sanskrit for suchness. It's equivalent to suchness. The Sanskrit for suchness is ta-ta-ta. No sutra or tantra taught does not contain the methods for realizing emptiness, the abiding state, the 5 stages by Nagarjuna. So he picks this as being like it's like the main tantric text of the new tantra system. This famous text by Nagarjuna, the Panchakrama. The suchness presented in the various sutras and tantras does not describe anything other than this total emptiness. But an interesting little qualification, total emptiness, as presented in the Kalachakra, this endowed with the supreme manifestation. The Nivarana Nishkambin's praise of the Bhagavan says, you taught the Dharma, primordial peace in the absence of arising. You turned the Dharma wheel of natural nirvana, as opposed to the earlier version of nirvana as being either with or without outflows. Thus, the 2 paths of Sutra and Tantra are presented as methods for realizing emptiness. Among those, the core of the Sutra path is listening, reflecting, and meditation in general, the 3 prajnas, and the practices of the 6 paramitas in particular. The point of all those is explained as being contained within meditation on the abiding state. The Vajra Samadhi Sutra states when you do not move from emptiness, the 6 paramitas are present. The Sutra of the Questions of Brahman Vishvabala says, not deliberating is generosity, not differentiating is ethical conduct, not separating is patience, the absence of adopting or rejecting is diligence, non-attachment is meditative concentration, and non-conceptuality is prajna. Interesting glosses on the paramitas for sure. The great Brahmin Saraha comments, reading is it, retaining and meditating are it too. Explaining the Shastras and Puranas is it as well. And he's using the word it in the way that Trungpa Rinpoche used the word that, meaning suchness. Rob?
So from that, it's not hard to see where Sakya Pandita starts getting his slander from.
Yeah, it is. That's true. But you got to read between the lines, man. You can't just like take it
I
at
know, but
face
it's
value.
but what also strikes me though is that why read these things in the worst possible light? You can also sort of lean the other way and get a much more positive, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. Like, can you think for a minute? Well, they can't be that simplistic and be like literally uh, um, leaning to one extreme or the other. There must be some subtlety going on here. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt and look into it. The Tantra of so the Puranas, or Puranas rather, are not a type of fish in Sanskrit. That's another language. And but they're a type of texts that are big in like the what's so-called Hindu tradition. I think it's sort of, and so Sarha was a great Brahmin. It's interesting that it refers to those. The Tantra of non-abiding states, having eaten the food of the uncontrived natural state, yum, you'll be satisfied with all the philosophical tenets. The childish lacking understanding rely on terms and words. Everything is of the characteristic of your own mind. That's the response to Sakyapantita right there. It's like, you know, you're just relying on terms and words and taking them out of context in a simplistic way. The core of the mantra path is said to be the two processes of generation and perfection, where all such elaborations are taught in order to unite us with the realization of non-elaborate wisdom. The ultimate intended meaning is non-elaboration. The Vajradhaka says to realize the natural yoga, use contrived meditations and contrived recitations. Once you realize the natural yoga, on the other side of contrived yogas don't do anything contrived ever again. Just as someone who has clung to a raft across the river will discard it on the other side, so should we treat contrivances. Those who are bound by and Vajragarbha's commentary on that, those who are bound by the latent tendencies of concepts should rely on conceptual rituals at first. Once they've recognized the nature of concepts, they will enter non-conceptuality. It is taught, therefore, that non-elaborate suchness contains completely the meaning of all the yogas of secret mantra. The two-part, which is a way that the Tibetans refer to the Hebadra Tantra, which has two sections to it, remarks, mantras and deities are truly present within the nature of non-elaboration. There's no contradiction there. It also says it is mantra recitation, asceticism, and burnt offerings. It is those belonging to the mandala and the mandala itself. In sum, mind is the all-inclusive form. This is a funny way of talking about mind as form. The king of the tantras of secret Amrita, the deathless potion. Amrita states, when you discover that all activities and actions, making offerings, tormas, and the like are the suchness of mind, you'll be certain that contains everything. So those of you that do tantric practice, it's helpful to realize that this is the view you need to have towards all the ritual involved in Vajrayana. Nevertheless, in terms of bringing about the realization of true wisdom, it is said that if we do not have these Mahamudra instructions, we will find it difficult to realize luminosity, Mahamudra, the ultimate abiding state, through just the main paths of sutra and mantra. So this goes the other way. It's saying that not only should you combine essence Mahamudra with these other two paths, but these other two paths are very hard to achieve completion through if you don't understand essence Mahamudra. Sarha proclaims those priests called bhikshus, shramaneras, or staviras are monastics. Some set out to teach the sutras, some regard one taste as a way to hold the mind. Interesting sort of put down there. Others rush into the Mahayana. They encounter the authentic shastras of the scriptural tradition, those of Nagarjuna and so forth. Others meditate on mandala chakras, meaning on the inner subtle body. A few expound the meaning of the fourth, would be a reference to the fourth Abhisheka, which is the ultimate Abhisheka. Some conceptualize the dhatu of space as being a thing. Still others make emptiness into a view. In other words, they cling to their understanding of emptiness. Mostly they engage the opposite of what they seek. That is such a powerful statement that, like, in so many ways in life, like, you can end up pursuing the opposite of what you actually want, like happiness, for starters. Those who are divorced from the connate state separate nirvana from the meditator. The ultimate is not achieved in isolation. Tilopa observes the specific texts and philosophies of those who expound mantra of the paramitas, Vinaya, sutras, and the various pitakas, the baskets of scriptures, will not bring you to see luminosity, Mahamudra. If we rely on these instructions of Mahamudra, the definitive meaning, it is said to be easy to realize the ultimate abiding state, the Abhidhana Sutra states. Those who definitely enjoy Mahamudra will perfect meditation. They will achieve in this lifetime both freedom and Buddhahood, liberation and Buddhahood. Interesting that he lists those two as like two separate stages, which is the traditional view. The sun and moon sadhana says yogins and yoginis of superior abilities cultivate the samadhi of bliss, emptiness, the natural outflow, by relying on ultimate Mahamudra and training in unwavering meditative concentration. It's thought that after 3 years and 3.5 months they will achieve the supreme city. This is a reference to what that was used as the basis for developing the 3-year retreat, I think. Finally, the explanation of the greatness of the individuals. The practitioners, this has two parts: the greatness of this actual lineage in India. The teacher Vajradhara taught an infinite number of Niruttara tantras, and in particular he taught the tantras of the ultimate essence, Mahamudra Tilaka, the glorious tantra on the unsullied, which was the basis for that TV series, I think, right? The Game of Thrones. Tantra of non-abiding, and others, which he entrusted to Guhyapati in the land of Odiyana. Guhyapati instructed wisdom Dakinis. The incarnate king called Visukalpa went to Odiyana, where he received all the instructions and teachings from the wisdom Dakinis, and he brought forth many secret mantra teachings. He examined potential recipients and saw that the great Brahmin Saraha was one of the very highest abilities, a gifted individual who was karmically destined as an instantaneous type. Visukalpa gave him the instructions, and Saraha was freed. Saraha put all the instructions on the ultimate into songs and set many fortunate beings free. This is the well-known origin of the actual lineage. It's interesting the way they say the actual lineage. This actual lineage. Trungpa Rinpoche at one point created banners that he translated as the true lineage, Tun Gyu. This word Tun, that's probably what's being translated here as actual. I have to ask Elizabeth that. Let's see, according to the accounts in the Dohas, root symbols and Indians' secret conduct, 3 texts. Once the true perfect Buddha had turned the Dharma wheel 3 times for the 3 types of disciples and was about to show the way to pass into nirvana, he saw that it was time to teach the wondrous ultimate essence of his Dharma. He went to the southern regions where, in the city of Adoli, at the request of Manjushri and Avalokiteshwar, he bestowed this Dharma of the ultimate essence on the immeasurable number of bodhisattvas gathered there. He prophesied that later the 2 bodhisattvas meaning Manjushri and Avalokiteshvara, the Brahmin Saraha, Nagarjuna, Shawaripa, and others would appear to teach the ultimate essence. Subsequently, Manjushri took the illusory emanation of the divine son, Ratnamati, who's this elusive figure in the lineage. There's no information hardly on this gentleman, but he appears in the Kagyu lineage tree representation that many of us have used for our prostrations. And Avalokiteshvara took that of the divine son Sukhanata, and they both taught the great Brahman. I don't think I've ever heard of Sukhanata, but it's said that Sarha was instantly free. Other accounts agree on most of those points, except for a few details, such as that Ratnamati was an emanation of the Buddha instead of Manjushri, and Sukhanata was an emanation of Pati instead of Avalokiteshvara. Such variances do not create contradictions, because ultimately everything, the five essences and so forth, are said to be the display of the teacher. That's an interesting little sentence there, because there's so many different statements in the sutras and the tantras that are contradictory on the surface. And so it's interesting the way that he both acknowledged the contradiction as well as it didn't faze him. Thus, there are accounts that the teacher Vajradhara taught the two emanated bodhisattvas. They taught and liberated the great Brahman, Saraha, the forefather of all of the Mahasiddhas in the noble land, i.e. India. Sarha taught the protector Nagarjuna, who is renowned as being like a second victor, a second Buddha. Those two were gurus for most of the early Mahasiddhas in the noble land of India. So Sarha and Nagarjuna. In particular, Nagarjuna liberated the glorious Shawaripa, who was a gifted person of the dancer caste. That's cool. He was a dancer. It's neat. One karmically destined as an instantaneous type. I love this. The instantaneous type. What are you? Later, Shawaripa directly received the instructions on the ultimate essence from the two bodhisattvas and Sarha himself. It is well known that they all attained illusory kayas or space kayas, and that since then worthy beings can encounter them on Sri Parvata in the south, which is an area where all the great siddhas go after they retire. It's like a Miami, right? The transmission of their teachings spread in the noble land in the form of numerous instructions on the essence, such as the 7 Mahamudra city texts, the sixfold essence cycle, the 24 texts, and the Dharma cycle, and Manasikara, as well as the longer and shorter Doha texts. Those inspired such great awe towards the instructions on the ultimate essence in the wise Panditas and Siddhas of later times that most set out to find the gurus and instructions of this specific lineage. The scholar Siddha Maitripa was one who heard of the greatness of the lineage and the Dharma of the ultimate essence. With tremendous difficulty, he traveled to Sri Parvata in the south looking for the Lord Shawari. At first, when he was unable to find him, he began to feel suicidal. Wow. Finally, he met Shawaripa and gradually received the instructions on the essence. Then he went to Madhya Desha in central India. Later on, due to those instructions, he became known as the master Maitripa in Vajrasana, the Vajra seat Bodh-gaya, where the Buddha attained enlightenment itself, someone more outstanding than others. He promulgated many texts and commentaries on the esoteric instructions of the ultimate essence, in particular the lineage from his student Bharatapani, expanded the instructions on the ultimate essence, such as the dohas, root symbols, and secret conduct. According to what is well known in this practice lineage, the renowned Mahasiddha Tilopa, who is beyond being an ordinary human being, is regarded by some as an emanation of the Bhagavan Chakrasambhara, and by others as an emanation of the Bodhisattva Chittavajra. In his illusory kaya, that's cool. He went to Akanishta, where he heard all the vast and profound Dharma from Vajradhara self. Having mastered the secret mantra, he became like the Bodhisattva Vajrapani. It's interesting, this version of the life of Tilopa has some differences from the other versions that we know about. It's like other versions, he gets the transmission from the Vajradakini. Here he gets it, but you always see reference to him getting it direct from Vajradhara, but it's not really recounted here. It's clearly recounted. He became like the Bodhisattva Vajrapani. Tilopa combined the mantra generation process into the 4 and 6 branches. So those are the what become known as the 6 dharmas of Naropa. Later, the perfection process of the Father Tantras into the 5 stages, which is the scheme presented in the Garshanas Panchakrama, and the perfection process of the Mother Tantras into the 4 mudras that we see in this Mahamudra tradition and the 6 branches. His statement, I, Tilopa, have no human gurus, caused others to doubt him. That was a bit controversial thing to say, huh? To ease their concerns as an externalized mode of appearance, he again studied with human gurus. It's okay. I'll study with some gurus. Some, just to make you guys happy. His gurus for the 4 transmissions. So he had 16 gurus, 4 in each of the 4 directions, of transmissions of different, of 4 specific things, were the Acharya Nagarjuna, Krishna Acharya, the Mahasiddha Kambala, and the Dakini Subhagini. He took as his gurus many Mahasiddhas, including Luipa's disciples, the brothers Tengipa and Darikapa, Indrabhuti and Vajraganta, and numerous yoginis, and then demonstrated liberation. I love that part. He not only achieved liberation, he demonstrated it. This is how you do it. This is how this is done. I guess that's when he rose up in the middle of town to the height of 7 pala trees. I think it's, and then he emanated and gathered and so forth. Subsequently, Tilopa went to the great kingdom of Sahor in the east, where he taught the Dharma in the middle of the city. It said that as a result, many hundreds of thousands of people went to celestial realms, leaving the city empty. Oh my God. He's also known for subjugating 8 cities through his miraculous powers, and the life story that we have of him includes these encounters with these 8 cities that he enlightens. Thus, there are accounts of his liberating innumerable beings. It is also said that as long as the Buddha's teachings endure, Tilopa himself remains and continues to practice his yogic conduct in his illusory kaya. So, similar to Padmasambhava, he's still around doing his thing. There lived at that time the great Acharya Naropa, who was learned in sutra, mantra, and the sciences, and had attained the mantra cities on the basis of prophecies from the Bhagavan Chakrasambhara and Dakinis, i.e. the elderly woman who encounters him, berates him. He went to the region of Sahor to find the great Lord of Yogins. Tilopa, having met him there, Naropa pleased him with the service of 12 austerities, and received all the instructions in the manner, 1 vase being poured into another. Afterwards he went to Madhya Desha, where he benefited many disciples who included the 7 like himself, such as Maitripa, 108 siddhas, Paindapatika, and others, 54 yogins practicing yogic discipline, 1,100 qualified yogins, Nepalese Pamtingpa, and the Tibetan Marpa Lotsawa. Naropa is renowned for having attained an immortal rainbow-like body. Interesting for a Mahamudra guy to achieve rainbow body, which is more common in the Dzogchen tradition. The greatness of this practice lineage in Tibet, the master Marpa Lotsawa traveled to India on 3 occasions, where he spent a long time studying with Siddha Gurus, the exalted Naropa, Maitripa, and others. Through his practice of their profound instructions, he severed his misinterpretations of all the Lotsawas who went to India. This master Marpa was famous for the profound and vast instructions he received. So here, we have the promoter, a Kagyupa, holder of the Kagyu Gampopa lineage, promoting the Marpa Kagyu, big time, as opposed to the progenitors of the Sakya tradition, Dombe Hiruka and others. He was a leader among those who spoke two languages, Sanskrit and Tibetan. His fame for being a siddha spread. He had many students who became siddhas, such as the three Me Tsonpo, Nok Chodur, and Ram, as well as Surchon, Golak, and others. In particular, Mila Shepa Dorje of Guntong, pleased the great master by enthusiastically undertaking physical hardships. He then received the general instructions, specifically the Mahamudra, the esoteric instructions on the ultimate essence, and the special instructions of the profound hearing lineage. The profound hearing lineage, that's the special one that was passed down from Tilopa to Naropa to Marpa to Milarepa, and kept 1-to-1 for 13 generations. Having undergone difficulties that fill all who hear of them with amazement and sadness, Milarepa planted the victory banner of practice and became renowned as a great lord of yogins in the snowy land, as opposed to the noble land. What is India? Something. And he had many students who became siddhas, led by the four great repas. Repas are cotton-clad yogins, eight minor repas, and the 6 teachers. The practice lineage up through the great exalted one, Milarepa, primarily focused its meditation on the esoteric instructions of secret mantra, the 6 dharmas of Naropas, who, during practices such as Chandali and luminosity, which are 2 of the 6 dharmas, the sort of main 2 Mahamudra instructions would be given as appropriate. Following that time, the exalted great Kampopa, out of his limitless compassion and in order to facilitate realization in all of his disciples, superior and inferior, skillfully extracted the Mahamudra instructions on the ultimate essence and taught them widely, thereby spreading and expanding them, which is why we have separate presentations on Mahamudra, such as this amazing book. They became the single path traversed by all those of good fortune. There is a special connection established previously that is worth discussing briefly. In an earlier time, the exalted Kampopa was the Bodhisattva Chandra Prabha Kumara in the retinue of the Bhagawan Munindra, Buddha of the prior Aeon. When the teacher was presenting the King of Samadhi Sutra, he asked the large assembly of bodhisattvas, in future hard times, when the genuine Dharma is declining, who will explain the meaning of this sutra and spread it? Chandraprabha Kumar rose and promised that he would do so. So this is a little weird because he's had the same name like aeons before under the Buddha Munindra, but as he did under Shakyamuni. But okay. The teacher placed his hand on his head and, calling on the assembly bodhisattvas such as Maitreya, Ajita, the invincible Ajita, or limitless life, and the world with its gods as witnesses, prophesied that in the future, when there are great terrors, Chandra Prabha Kumara would always adhere to pure conduct, promulgate genuine samadhi, reveal the Dharma treasures of the Sugatas, have a retinue of no fewer than 500, and finally as awake as the victor of Vimala Prabha. The teacher gave his blessings to prevent obstacles occurring. In the same spirit, 800 Dharma teachers stood up and promised to preserve the meaning of the King of Samadhi Sutra, as Chandraprabha Kumara had done. 800 million gods, nagas, yakshas, and others pledged to protect those holy beings. All of this is explained in the King of Samadhi Sutra, which is available in translation now through the 84,000 project, initiated and guided by Dzongtsar Khyentse Rinpoche. The white lotus of great compassion, that's the Lotus Sutra I was referring to earlier, teaches that the Buddha reassured Ananda that after he passed into nirvana, a bhikshu named Jivaka would appear in the north, who would receive much praise and increase and spread the teacher's doctrine. Upon his death, Jivaka would go immediately to the worldly realm known as Gunalamkara, within Amitabha's land of Sukhavati. Never heard of subdivisions of Sukhavati, like different parts of it. That's neat. Where he would awaken as the Tathagata Vimala Prabha, which is the name of Gampopa's Buddhahood. Okay. So I think they're saying that Jivaka, who was one of the, early on there were these 7 holders of the Sangha after the Buddha, started with Mahakashyapa and then Ananda, and I think Jivaka was one of them. There are many other prophecies, such as that to the north of Vajrasana, Bodh Gaya, in the snowy land on the banks of the great Lohit River, and dense forests and rocky mountains. A Dharma teacher and bhikshu named Jivaka, with a retinue of not less than 500, would enjoy the Tathagata's wisdom, since such accounts are numerous. I will not write about them here for fear of being too wordy. Those who wish for more should refer to those sutras. In keeping with those prophecies, to the north of Vajrasana, in the dense forests and rocky mountain region of the glorious Dakla Gampo, which is where Gampopa set up his monastery, there appeared the one known as the exalted Gampopa, the Bhikshu Jivaka, physician. Jivaka meaning physician. With a retinue of disciples not less than 500, they practiced the intended meaning of the King of Samadhi Sutra, the instructions on the ultimate essence known as Mahamudra, and spread that widely among their disciples. Similarly, in keeping with the scriptural passage in which the previous 800 Dharma teacher Bodhisattvas promised to preserve the meaning of the King of Samadhi Sutra, there appeared in the land of Tibet many famous Mahasiddhas who were either students of Gampopa or students of his students. They held, preserved, and spread the teachings on the essence. The great roar of their fame in the regions of snowy Tibet reverberated throughout the world. The glorious Tokpo Kargi became renowned in neighboring lands, India, Nepal, China, Mongolia, and beyond, even now, which is the most degenerate time. Yeah, just wait. In a very degenerate period, individuals cast aside their concerns for this life and plant the victory banner of practice in terrifying charnel grounds under rocky outcroppings in deserted empty valleys in isolated exclusion. Everyone can clearly see that they are beings superior to those of other lineages. A little sectarianism there at the end. That completes the brief explanation of the particulars that generate confidence. So, how do you generate confidence in Mahamudra? He went on for some length about this whole thing with Gampopa and the Samadhi Raja Sutra and that whole thing. It's a little bit of a mystery, this Samadhi Raja Sutra, because if you look through the sutra, there's not really anything much that you could point to as being like Mahamudra-ish, strangely. Anyway,
Well, I read the part where it said, just as long as you simply enjoy Mahamudra, that's it. That's all you got to do. You just have to enjoy it. And voila.
that's right. That's right.
I have one. Practice, practice, practice.
That's great.
How do you get
Well,
to
he
How do you
starts
get to
out
Sri
talking
Parvati?
about what it is.
Yeah,
Know what what you're doing,
yeah,
where you're going.
yep.
Um,
Yes, if you go back to the first part of the chapter, it says 3 parts: the particulars that generate confidence in the beginning, the exposition of the preliminaries. So we haven't gone there. We're still in this. The preliminaries are part of generating confidence, and then the actual way to cultivate.
yeah.
I see. So I see. The chapter title is titled after the first of these 3 parts: the particulars that generate confidence, the greatness of the Dharma, the greatness of the individuals. That's it. They have confidence in the teachings and confidence in the teachers, the practitioners, the people who embodied it. Any final comments or
Seems like you also
suggestions?
seems like you also have to have a little bit of confidence in your own experience.
Say more.
Well, I mean, either the practice is working, as you're sitting, or you're not there. And generally one knows.
Generally, one knows. So confidence that your practice is oriented towards essence Mahamudra, is oriented towards what was presented in this chapter in terms of understanding emptiness correctly, understanding meditation correctly, and understanding the view and the conduct and so
Right,
forth.
right. We start with our concepts and then we apply them.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
gradually they fall away. Once you get the raft to the other side, I guess they'll fall away.
Yeah, they didn't really have inflatable and deflatable rafts, and I guess that you could pack up easily. Yeah. Interesting presentation. A lot of interesting details about Mahamudra presented in this chapter. Shall we conclude? Anything else? By this merit may all attain omniscience, may defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom, may the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled, may all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Night.
Thank you, everyone. Great to
Thank
see you.
you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Thank
See
you,
you soon.
Derek.
I'll get
Thank
back to you
you.
about the schedule. Take care.